He survived an explosion that was meant to kill him. An assassin disguised as a journalist handed him a tape recorder. 60 seconds later, it detonated. The blast shattered his right arm, permanently paralyzed it. His vocal cords were torn apart. But instead of fading into obscurity, this man would rise to become one of the most powerful figures of the last 4 decades. A leader so consequential that his decisions have shaped geopolitics across an entire region. His name is Ali Khamenei, and his story is one of revolution, survival, and the iron grip of power. Welcome to Deep Reality Stories. I'm your host, and today we're diving into the extraordinary life of the man who has ruled Iran since 1989, a reign that has fundamentally transformed a nation and destabilized an entire region. To understand Ali Khamenei, we need to go back to a different era, a time when Iran was called the Imperial State of Iran, and the Shah ruled with an iron fist. Khamenei was born on July 17, 1939, in the holy city of Mashhad, in northeastern Iran. His father, Javad Khamenei, was a respected Shia cleric who had studied at Najaf in Iraq, one of the holiest cities in Shia Islam. The family was not wealthy. They lived modestly. They subsisted on bread, dates, and raisins, but they were respected. The Khamenei name would eventually echo through history, but in those early years they were simply a religious family trying to survive under a secular Shah. Young Ali was shaped by two powerful influences, his father's religious authority and his mother's education. She taught him Persian history, art, and literature. From childhood he was groomed for religious scholarship, but the world around him was changing. Iran in the 1950s and 60s was a nation caught between tradition and modernization. The Shah wanted Iran to look like the West. He launched what he called the White Revolution, a program to modernize the economy, reform land ownership, and reduce the power of Islamic clerics. The clerics saw this as an existential threat. In 1963, a young Ayatollah named Ruhollah Khomeini spoke out against the Shah. He was arrested. Thousands took to the streets. Hundreds died. The regime's response was brutal. Khomeini was exiled. And that's when 17-year-old Ali Khamenei made a fateful decision. In 1957, he traveled to the holy city of Qum to study under Ayatollah Khomeini. This was before Khomeini became a revolutionary icon. At the time, Khomeini was simply a respected religious scholar with a reputation for opposing the Shah. Khamenei became his student. More than that, he became his disciple. When Khomeini was exiled in 1964, Khamenei faced a choice: follow his teacher into exile or stay in Iran and work against the regime from within. He chose to stay. He returned to Mashhad to care for his aging father. This decision would later haunt him. Many would argue that his religious training was incomplete, that he never fully qualified to lead Islam's faithful. But between 1964 and 1979, Ali Khamenei became a man of action. He translated revolutionary Islamic texts into Persian. He was arrested multiple times, held in solitary confinement for months, his location kept secret from his family. In 1975, he spent 8 months in a Tehran prison. They tortured him, they isolated him, but they couldn't break him. He gave sermons, he traveled the country, he spread the ideology of Islamic revolution, and in 1977 he helped found the Association of Combatant Clergy, a secret organization dedicated to overthrowing the Shah. By the late 1970s, Iran was a powder keg waiting to explode. In 1978, Iran erupted. Strikes paralyzed the economy, protests flooded the streets, the Shah's secret police, the Savak, responded with arrests and executions, but they couldn't contain the tide of revolution. On January 16, 1979, the Shah fled Iran. His government collapsed. And on February 1, 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini returned from 14 years of exile. Khamenei was there waiting. What followed was a struggle that wasn't obvious at the time. The revolution hadn't been led solely by Islamic hardliners. It was a coalition, clerics, yes, but also secular. The moderates wanted a democracy. The clerics wanted a theocracy, and slowly, methodically, the hardliners won. By December 1979, Khomeini had been declared the first supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran. The clerics had seized power. Khamenei played a crucial role in this consolidation of power. He helped establish the Islamic Republican Party, the official government party. He was appointed to the Islamic Revolutionary Council, the shadowy 13-man body that actually ran the country. He helped purge the military of officers loyal to the Shah. He was rising quietly, systematically. But in the early 1980s, the new Islamic Republic was far from secure. Counter-revolutionary forces were everywhere. royalists loyal to the Shah, Marxist groups funded by the Soviet Union, and a militant religious group called the Forkan, Shia Islamists who opposed the clerical monopoly on power. The Forkan believed that Islam should liberate the poor, not enrich the clergy. They saw Khomeini and his supporters as betrayers of the revolution. So they decided to decapitate the regime's leadership. And that's where our story circles back to that tape recorder. June 27, 1981. Khamenei arrived at the Abuzar Mosque in Tehran to speak with the congregation. He was now a member of parliament and the leader of Friday prayers in the capital. He was fast becoming the face of the revolution, a rising star in Khomeini's regime. A man approached him. He said he was a journalist. He said he wanted to record Khamenei's words. It seemed innocent enough. Khamenei agreed. The man placed a tape recorder on the table in front of him. It was blue. It looked ordinary. Khamenei began to speak. Minutes passed, and then the device started to make a sound, a high-pitched whistle. Khamenei knew immediately what was happening. The explosion was devastating. Shrapnel tore through his body. His right arm took the brunt of the blast. The nerves were severed. The arm would remain almost completely paralyzed for the rest of his life. His neck was lacerated. His vocal cords were permanently damaged. Inside the remains of the device, the regime found a message, a gift from the Forkan group. But here's the remarkable thing. Khamenei didn't fade away. He didn't retire in pain and despair. Instead, he fought back. Just days after the assassination attempt, the regime executed the Forkan group's members. The group was obliterated, and Khamenei's injuries, far from ending his career, accelerated it. The soft-spoken voice you hear today, the raspy, almost whispered delivery, that's the permanent reminder of that explosion. But it also became part of his image. The wounded warrior who survived the enemy's blade. The martyr who kept fighting. 6 days before the assassination attempt, the first president of post-revolution Iran, Abul Hassan Banisadr, had been impeached. Khomeini wanted him gone because he was too secular, too reformist. Then his replacement, Mohammad Ali Rajai, was assassinated just 29 days into his presidency by the People's Mujahedin. The seat was empty, and elections were called for October 2, 1981. Khamenei was on the ballot, and he won in a landslide. From 1981 to 1989, Khamenei served as the third president of Iran. 8 years, and during every single one of those years, Iran was at war. Saddam Hussein had invaded in September 1980, hoping for a quick victory. Instead, the war became a nightmare, a grinding, brutal conflict that would last 8 years and kill over 1 million people. Chemical weapons were used. Entire generations were sent to the front as cannon fodder. Khamenei's role during the war was telling. He was a moderate. Unlike the hardliners, he believed Iran should accept a ceasefire. As early as 1982, he was advocating for peace. But Khomeini overruled him. The supreme leader wanted to continue the fight. He wanted to overthrow Saddam. The war continued. This is an important pattern to understand. Khamenei was not the revolutionary zealot that Khomeini was. He was more calculating, more pragmatic. He read Western literature. He understood nuance. But he was also a survivor. He didn't openly defy Khomeini. He complied. He managed. And he built his base of power. During his presidency, Khamenei began to transform the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, into his personal power base. The IRGC had been created in 1979 as an ideological army, designed to protect the revolution from both external enemies and internal corruption. Under Khamenei, it became something else entirely. He micromanaged its command structure. He ensured absolute loyalty. He diverted state resources to expand its power. This was Khamenei's genius. While appearing to be a loyal servant of Khomeini, he was systematically building the infrastructure of power that would allow him to rule after Khomeini's death. And in 1989, Khomeini died. Khamenei was 50 years old. Ayatollah Khomeini passed away on June 3, 1989. He was approaching his 90th year. The Iranian regime had always known this day would come. The question was, who would succeed him? This is where the story gets interesting. Khamenei was not the obvious choice. Many clerics thought he was underqualified. His religious training had been cut short. He wasn't the most scholarly Ayatollah in Iran. He wasn't the most charismatic. He wasn't even the favorite of many senior clerics. But on June 4, 1989, just one day after Khomeini's death, the Assembly of Experts, the body responsible for choosing the supreme leader, convened. And they voted. The result was stunning. Khamenei was elected by 60 votes to 14. How did this happen? How did a moderate, underqualified former president become the supreme leader? The answer is he was a compromise. None of the major factions could agree on anyone else. Khamenei was acceptable to enough people that he could win. There were also rumors, never substantiated but widely believed, that Khomeini, late in his life, had indicated his preference for Khamenei. Whether true or not, it gave Khamenei's candidacy legitimacy. But here's the critical insight. The regime also made a constitutional change. They expanded the powers of the supreme leader. They streamlined the political system. And they positioned Khamenei as the ultimate arbiter of power, above the president, above parliament, above the judiciary. Khamenei was now the most powerful man in Iran. And unlike his predecessor, Khamenei was young enough to rule for decades. He was pragmatic enough to adapt to changing circumstances, and he was ruthless enough to consolidate power. From 1989 onwards, Khamenei embarked on a systematic transformation of Iran. He wasn't interested in spreading revolution or grand ideological gestures. He was interested in power, stability, control. And most importantly, he was interested in ensuring that when he died, no one else could challenge him. Over the next 3 decades, Khamenei built what can only be described as a surveillance and security state. In 1992, just 3 years after becoming supreme leader, he created the Police Command of the Islamic Republic. This wasn't just a police force. It was an umbrella organization controlling over 250,000 security personnel. It was designed to monitor the population, suppress dissent, and enforce the regime's vision of Islamic morality. Then in 2005, as the reformist President Mohammad Khatami's presidency was ending, Khamenei went further. He created the Gashti Irshad, the Guidance Patrol, more commonly known as the Morality Police. The Morality Police were tasked with enforcing Sharia law, particularly regarding women's dress codes and public behavior. They reported directly to Khamenei, not to civilian authorities, and they had broad powers to arrest, detain, and interrogate. This wasn't a new idea. Khomeini had secret police, but Khamenei systematized it. He made it more efficient, more pervasive, more totalitarian. The result was a society under constant surveillance. Young people couldn't gather without fear of arrest. Women couldn't appear in public without proper hijab. Journalists couldn't report freely. Political opponents couldn't organize. But here's what's crucial to understand. This wasn't random oppression. It was strategic. It was designed to prevent another revolution. It was designed to prevent any challenge to Khamenei's rule. And for decades it worked. Between 1989 and 2024, there were protests, certainly. In 1999, students took to the streets after a newspaper was shut down. Over 1,000 were arrested. In 2009, after disputed elections, millions protested in the Green Movement. The regime responded with mass arrests, torture, and execution. But no protest movement was allowed to grow. No opposition was allowed to organize. Khamenei's grip on power was absolute. Internationally, Khamenei pursued a different strategy. Rather than direct confrontation with the West, he built a network of proxies, groups that would fight his enemies while maintaining plausible deniability for the Iranian regime. In Lebanon, he supported Hezbollah, a Shia militant organization that evolved into a state within a state. In Gaza, he supported Hamas. They allowed Khamenei to project power across the region without directly challenging American or Israeli military superiority. And they worked. For 15 years, the strategy seemed brilliant. Iran was building influence. Its proxies were winning conflicts. Its alliances with Russia and China were strengthening. But then everything changed. October 7, 2023. Hamas launched a coordinated assault on Israel. Thousands of Israeli civilians were killed, hostages were taken, and Israel responded with overwhelming force. What followed was a catastrophe for Khamenei's entire regional strategy. Israel destroyed Gaza. It decimated Hamas. Then it turned on Hezbollah in Lebanon. In September 2024, Israel conducted an extraordinary coordinated attack on Hezbollah's communications network. Walkie-talkies and pagers had been booby-trapped with explosives. Thousands of Hezbollah members were killed or wounded in seconds. It was a stunning demonstration of Israeli technological superiority. Then came the bombing campaigns. Lebanon's infrastructure was devastated. Hezbollah's military command structure was shattered. By the end of 2024, Hezbollah had been reduced from a major regional power to a severely weakened militia. The Houthis in Yemen, despite their brave rhetoric, were repeatedly bombed by American and Israeli forces. They continued to harass shipping in the Red Sea, but they were clearly losing. And then on June 13, 2025, Israel launched what can only be described as a decapitation strike on Iran itself. Precision missiles targeted Iran's nuclear and military infrastructure. Leading military officers were killed, nuclear scientists were assassinated. Khamenei went into hiding. He even recorded messages about the succession, fearing he might be killed. Days later, American forces also struck Iranian nuclear facilities. This is the critical moment. Khamenei had spent 36 years building a regional power structure. He had sacrificed economic growth to fund proxies. He had accepted crippling international sanctions to develop nuclear weapons. And in a matter of months, that entire strategy was revealed to be hollow. Iran's military, which Khamenei had developed as a counterweight to the West, turned out to be no match for Israeli and American forces. The proxies, which were supposed to be Iran's strength, were obliterated. The nuclear program, which Khamenei had made the centerpiece of his foreign policy, suddenly seemed irrelevant. Khamenei had built a regional empire on sand. But perhaps more damaging than the military defeats was what was happening at home. Despite decades of rule, despite an iron grip on power, Khamenei's Iran was economically stagnant. Oil revenues, which should have made Iran wealthy, were squandered on wars and weapons. Young Iranians faced unemployment. Inflation eroded their savings. The corruption of the regime was impossible to ignore. The Iranian people, especially the young, had lost faith in Khamenei. They looked at the billions spent on proxies and nuclear programs, and they asked, "Where is our money? Why are we suffering?" In September 2022, a young woman named Mahsa Amini was arrested by the morality police for improper hijab. She died in police custody, beaten, tortured. Her death sparked massive protests. Millions took to the streets. For months, the regime trembled. Khamenei's security forces responded with characteristic brutality. Thousands were arrested. Hundreds were executed. The internet was censored, but the spirit of resistance remained alive. This is the tragic irony of Khamenei's rule. Through ruthless suppression, he maintained power. But he never built legitimacy. He never won the hearts of his people. He ruled through fear, not consent. And fear, as history has repeatedly shown, is never a stable foundation for power. In 36 years, Khamenei had made Iran more authoritarian, more isolated, and more militaristically aggressive, while leaving ordinary Iranians poorer and more desperate than they were in 1989. The revolution that was supposed to liberate Iran had instead enslaved it. And now, as Khamenei enters his mid-80s, the question that haunts the regime is unavoidable. What comes next? Ali Khamenei's life is a study in irony. He survived an assassination attempt that left him permanently wounded. He rose to absolute power in a nation of 90 million people. He built a regional network of proxies and supporters. He became one of the longest-ruling leaders in the world. But in doing so, he created a system that cannot survive him. His successor will inherit an economically exhausted nation, a population that despises the regime, a military. The question is, what will Iran look like after he's gone? Will it continue on the same path of authoritarian theocracy? Or will the reform movement that Khamenei crushed in the 2000s re-emerge to build a different Iran? That answer will be written by Iranians themselves. And it may be the most important geopolitical question of the next decade. Thank you for watching Deep Reality Stories. If you found this fascinating, please like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. Do you think Iran's future lies in continued theocratic rule or in a democratic transformation?